You're listening to iCommunicate with your host, Mark Altman, on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN. Once again, here's Mark.
Welcome back to iCommunicate, finding your voice. Let's continue our conversation about aspects of communication. We spoke about body language and listening. Now let's talk about what to say and how to say it.
Well, Cole, I think that I want to start with actually how you say it before we talk about what you say. And this actually talks about what we actually specialize in at Mindset Go and emotional intelligence. And so when you talk about how you say something is completely dictated by your emotional intelligence and how you react to certain people and certain situations. So for instance, when you accuse someone of something, okay, so if I say, Cole, you didn't do all of your chores, and you knew you did all of your chores, you would feel like you have to defend yourself. And when people feel like they have to defend themselves or they're accused, it impacts their tone in how they say something. So you might say, Dad, I did do that, right? So the tone could be frustrated or angry or even disrespectful. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so when it comes to tone and how you say something, you're impacted by your mood, by your energy, by your passion level at the time, by previous communication with the person you're talking to. Do you trust them? Do they believe in you? Do they have the confidence in you? So there are so many factors that impact the tone, the inflection, the intonation, and how you communicate with people. And it is just critical, and that's why I'm very big on emotional intelligence.
So, Mark, are you saying that tones and emotional intelligence can affect the whole dramatic run of a conversation?
I am, and I think for our viewers, it's a good time to maybe just let me briefly explain the characteristics of emotional intelligence. So the primary ones are self-awareness, self-control, social skills, and relationship skills. And there are other aspects of emotional intelligence, like around motivation and empathy and things like that. But I think what I'm talking about first, Cole, is that self-control, self-regulation piece. And we hear the word trigger often used in psychology, psychological terms. But when people do things that frustrate us or make us sad or irritate us, how we react when those things happen really can dictate the tone and word choice of a conversation.
Well, Mark, carrying on to that, I know the word trigger is used also now as a slang word, and I want you to explain why people should not use that word, and it should be just used as a medical term, also as many other words that children should not be saying.
Well, I think it has to do with the word stigma, Cole. I think people are so quick, especially now in communication, people are so quick to make snap judgments about ideas and opinions and emotions and feelings that I think when you talk about how trigger is used as a slang term, if you were to walk up to someone on the street and have a casual conversation and someone were to say, you know, what really triggers you? What really gets you upset? The person on the receiving end of that conversation, the typical person, would probably think that's kind of a weird question. Because what do you mean trigger? Like it feels like it feels like you have some kind of deep-seated psychological issue. But trigger just means it's just a psychological term for what upsets you. What causes you to react a certain way to certain things? And that brings us to the second aspect of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. So Cole, if you know that every time you interact with a certain person, that person's going to upset you when they bring up, here's a good example, Cole, politics. Politics is a very triggering topic.
It's very sensitive for lots of people.
Very sensitive. So if you know someone is very passionate about our president or passionate about not liking our president, and you know that gets them in a conflict and creates anger and frustration, and that's going to trigger their emotions, then you might choose not to talk to that person about politics because you don't necessarily want to trigger their emotions. So being self-aware of how you react to certain situations, being self-aware how other people react to certain situations, and adjusting your communication style accordingly is a big part of being a confident and effective communicator.
So it sounds like you're saying maybe two things. It sounds like maybe like some sort of chemical reaction where two things can go, if one attitude mixes with another attitude, or something that's brought up to another person that they do not like, it can trigger them and make like them mad, which can relate to a chemical reaction. Like two things mixing creates like an explosion, kind of.
Yeah, I think you explained that brilliantly. And actually, I love the metaphor you picked because explosion seems really, but it is a kind of explosion, actually. So I love the metaphor. I think that, Cole, really what it comes down to is I don't want to focus the emotional intelligence piece just on conflict and anger because, for example, I can say for my own personality that when I'm around people that can be negative or downers, it can really bring my energy down and my passion down. So it's not just about conflict and anger. It can be about mood and energy level. And it can work both ways, right? If you're around people that are very enthusiastic and passionate and positive, it can lift up your energy, right? And I definitely, Cole, see you as that way. And I think, Cole, actually, you're an example where I've seen both sides of your emotional intelligence. I've seen sides when you are a leader and you are someone that really lifts people's spirits and builds people's confidence. And then I see sometimes, for instance, when you compete at sports and you get very frustrated and you let other people distract you from what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. And that's the whole thing about emotional intelligence. It's so hard to do it all the time. 100. I don't know anybody who can achieve emotional intelligence. You wouldn't be human if you could achieve it 100% of the time. But the more characteristics of self-awareness you have, the more insight and intuition you have about adapting and adjusting to other people's personalities and communication styles, the better off you're going to be. So, for example, Cole, do you have an awareness about your personality that you know when you're interacting with other people, you have to be mindful of this because it could impact how comfortable people are communicating with you?
Well, yes, I think that's a great question, Mark. I sometimes see myself around other groups of friends, maybe thinking that sometimes I get too excited and too silly. But my friends, it doesn't seem to bother them. But sometimes with some people, it does. So I have to be careful around that.
That's a great example. And I think, Cole, the last point I want to make is I think relationship skills are so diverse. To really make a relationship work, I don't care if it's a marriage, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a close friend, a workplace relationship, a student and a teacher. I don't care what that relation is. It's work. And I know work isn't a great word for a lot of people, but if you're really emotionally intelligent and caring about how people perceive you, confident in how you perceive yourself, and all the things we've been talking about, it's a whole bunch of ingredients that make successful relationships.
Well, Mark, that was a great answer. Thank you. Do you think peer pressure, I know peer pressure affects children my age and older, and it can get them into very bad situations, especially when they get like into the 18, 19, 20 college years. So does it still affect you these days around other people and other people you work with in the professional world sometimes to agree on a deal you didn't want to do? Do people ever affect you to do that? Does peer pressure continue into the adult world?
No question, Cole. What a wonderful question, and what a wonderful way for us to finish up the show today. I think that it absolutely affects me. I think there's an element of all of us, whether it's being a people pleaser, whether it's getting approval from other human beings to validate what we do and to validate our success. I feel like peer pressure always plays some kind of part. And again, the definition of peer pressure at a younger age, it's kind of buckling or agreeing to things that your friends want you to do that you might not think is a good idea. At an adult level, at a professional level, it's doing things to fit in. I think a lot of people who drink, especially who socially drink, feel like the reason why they need to drink to fit in socially, or because it makes their personality more comfortable with their personality in a social environment. And I get that because I understand the desire and wanting to fit in. But I think that's why, Cole, at Mindset Go, we put such a big focus when we're training people and when we're coaching people on building the confidence through process and creating those for your internal voice. Because you know what, Cole, it comes down to two simple ingredients. There are two things that affect you more than anything else in your confidence. One is your inside voice, your internal voice, the messages your internal voice is giving you. And two is the outside encouragement or discouragement you're getting from external people. So those are the two things that we have to be mindful of all the time, because those are going to shape our confidence, which in turn is going to shape our mindset and our skill set and our tool set. All those things fit in, and that's why the emotional intelligence to me is way more important. EQ is way more important than IQ.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was a great answer. Everybody, thank you for joining us for another edition of iCommunicate on this wonderful Thursday afternoon. For my guest, Mark Altman, this has been Cole Altman, another edition of iCommunicate, Finding Your Voice.
You've been listening to iCommunicate with your host, Mark Altman, on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN.